Way back at the turn of the 20th century, a terrifying legend was born out in the African bush. It was a story about these invisible killers, about a massive modern project that was brought to its knees by, well, an ancient terror. But you know what? This wasn't some ghost story. This is the true scientific mystery of the Man Eaters of Tsavo.
Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1898, and we're in what was then called British East Africa. The British Empire is building this huge project, the Uganda Railway, a massive steel artery meant to represent progress, connecting the coast to the interior. But as this symbol of modernity pushes right through the Tsavo River Valley, it smacks head-on into a force of nature that just refuses to back down, and work grinds to a halt. Not because of engineering problems, but because the workers themselves are being hunted.
That's a quote from the guy in charge, Lieutenant Colonel John Henry Patterson. Now, his job was supposed to be building a bridge, but pretty quickly he found himself hunting monsters. The fear was so real and the killers were so sneaky that his men just couldn't make sense of it. They genuinely believed they were being stalked by supernatural forces, giving a name to a mystery that science would one day have to solve.
So, how did this whole legend really take hold? Well, for pretty much a full year, from March to December of 1898, an atmosphere of just absolute dread fell over that railway camp.
I mean, think about it. Every single night, the entire camp just held its breath. Two lions working together with this chilling coordination would slip right past the watchfires and the thorn barriers. They'd silently get into a tent, grab a man, and just drag him out into the darkness. The attacks were methodical, they were bold, and they were utterly terrifying. Now, the legend that grew out of this terror, you'll often hear that hundreds of people were killed. And yeah, the movie based on the story, The Ghost in the Darkness, definitely took some liberties. But Patterson's own records and historical accounts, they confirm a horrifying number. Dozens of men were killed and eaten by these two predators.
So, after months of trying and failing, Colonel Patterson finally managed to hunt and kill both lions. But here's the thing. When the creatures were finally seen in the light of day, the mystery didn't end. Oh no. In fact, it got a whole lot weirder. When they finally saw the culprits, it just raised more questions. These were enormous, powerful males. We're talking bigger, heavier, with larger skulls than your typical plains lions. But they were missing the one feature, the one thing everyone associates with a male lion.
And this picture just lays out the puzzle perfectly. On the left, you've got your typical male lion, right? That iconic, majestic mane. And on the right, that is one of the actual Tsavo man-eaters. Now on display at the Field Museum in Chicago, they had no manes. This wasn't just some weird quirk, it was a fundamental biological question mark.
And so, the whole legend really boils down to two critical scientific questions. First, why on earth did this specific group of lions not have manes? And second, the much more terrifying question, what drove them to become systematic predators of human beings?
To get those answers, we've got to fast forward about 100 years. Scientists at the Field Museum started a really deep analysis of the lions' remains, their skulls, their teeth, their chemical makeup, to piece together all the clues they left behind.
So why no mane? Well, one theory suggests this really ancient genetic link, a throwback to prehistoric cave lions, which were also maneless. But a more practical, down-to-earth theory points to the environment itself. In the hot, dense, thorny landscape of Tsavo, a big, heavy mane would be a total liability. You'd overheat and get snagged on everything. It's a pretty powerful argument for local adaptation.
So the crucial thing to get here is that these weren't just standard lions who, forgot to grow a mane. They were physically different. The research notes they were up to 50 kilograms heavier. That's a huge difference, and had larger skulls. They were basically a regional variation, perfectly built for life in a much tougher environment than the open savanna.
But that still leaves the biggest question of all. Why hunt people? Well, the science seems to point to a perfect storm of factors. It was a combination of injury, opportunity, and maybe, just maybe, a ghost of an instinct buried deep in their DNA.
And this was the smoking gun. When they examined the lion's skulls, they found severe dental disease. One of them had a broken canine and this painful abscess that had damaged its jawbone. I mean, just imagine trying to bite down on a struggling 1,000-pound buffalo and every bite sends agony through your jaw. It would be, well, agonizing. But a softer, slower human, suddenly available in large numbers thanks to the railway project, that's a much, much easier meal. All right, let's zoom out for a second, because as terrifying and as famous as the Tsavo incident was,
It wasn't a one-off event. This story of lions preying on humans is a recurring theme in Africa's history, and it often happens when our world and theirs collide. So, were they an isolated case? The simple answer is a big no. When the conditions are right, or I guess when they're wrong for the lions, this behavior can pop up just about anywhere.
Just look at this timeline. In the 1940s, a pride in Njombe, Tanzania, was responsible for a staggering number of deaths. Then, in 1991, another large, maneless lion terrorized a community in Zambia. And get this, as recently as 2000, lions in Uganda developed a specific technique for hunting people on bicycles. The pattern is clear. Injury, loss of habitat, or scarcity of their usual prey can push lions to see us as a viable food source.
And this is where things get really fascinating and, honestly, a little creepy. Some scientists think this isn't just opportunistic behavior, but it's the reawakening of an ancient instinct. I mean, for millions of years, the ancestors of big cats were the top predators of our own primate ancestors. So maybe, that predatory blueprint never really went away.
At the end of the day, the story of the Tsavo lions is so much more than just a historical horror story. It's this stark reminder that the line between our world and the wild is way more fragile than we like to think. It shows that when progress pushes too hard, too fast, it can awaken ancient instincts, forcing us to ask a pretty uncomfortable question. Are we really at the top of the food chain, or just conveniently out of reach?